So Trump has declared that they are going to be running Venezuela. The vice president of Venezuela has sworn in as the interim president. He has threatened the vice president of Venezuela, the vice president of Maduro, and told her that if she does not want to work with the US, what happened to Maduro may happen to her. So Venezuela is in a position where they are still confused because things happen so fast that they don't know where to put their head. All of that because of the traitors who betray their countries, those generals, those in charge of the army betray their countries. Don't allow anybody to tell you that the United States invaded Venezuela. That didn't happen. The very fact that they knew exactly where to get him clearly show all of us that it was a betrayal. It was not a military invasion. It was a coup d'etat that took place. Do not allow anyone to tell you the opposite. Now the question comes, why is it that the US is insisting so much on Venezuela's oil? Some people say South America is a backyard of the United States and therefore they want to focus on their backyard. But that's not the major reason why. In 2025, the US dollar took a major hit. For a while now, the BRICS countries have been encouraging other countries, including their own, to trade in using their own currency. In fact, they even talked about coming up with a new currency of the BRICS for all of the BRICS countries. And some countries, such as India, opposed that, right? But at least what Russia and China have been, successful in doing is to convince them that if you don't want a BRICS currency, exchange using your own currency. That will give you more leverage in terms of evading sanction. Look at what the US is doing with the sanctions, sanctioning everyone they want. In 2025 is when the US dollar took the biggest hit. For example, Saudi Arabia did not renew their contract with the United States in terms of oil in dollar, right? Of course, when they sell oil to the United States, they will sell it in US dollar. But in terms of selling to other countries internationally, Saudi Arabia refused to commit in selling their oil in US dollar only. When Saudi Arabia sell their oil to China, it used the Chinese currency. Because in 2025, the BRICS have pushed and convinced more countries to use their own currency, the US dollar lost a certain percentage of its value in 2025. The US dollar is in serious trouble. The conflict in Ukraine has confirmed that Russia has the most powerful weapons on earth. So the United States is losing the arm race with Russia. When it comes to the economy, the US has already lost against China. So the only thing that is left for the US is the dollar. And countries are stepping away from the dollar because of the arrogance of the US. So Maduro in Venezuela was trying to make a deal with China, a major deal on oil purchase. And if they are going to make a deal with China, it was clear that it wasn't going to be in US dollar. So the major threat here was the Venezuela-China deal. Keep in mind, China is the richest country on earth today because its economy is extremely big now and the population is way bigger, 3 times bigger than the US population. Not only that, Venezuela, right, is selling its oil to the biggest country in terms of economic, right, in population, right, both economic and population, China, but also Venezuela has the biggest oil reserve in the planet. And so you see the type of deal that was going to take place. That was a major threat to the US dollar.
Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has met China's Special Envoy Qiu Xiaoqi at the Miraflores Palace, underlining close ties between Caracas and Beijing. The meeting was attended by senior Venezuelan officials, including Vice President Delcy Rodriguez and Foreign Minister Yvonne Gil, alongside a Chinese technical and diplomatic delegation. State media says talks are expected to review more than 600 bilateral agreements, covering areas from energy to infrastructure. The visit comes as pressure on Maduro increases from the United States. President Donald Trump has stepped up sanctions, expanded the U.S. military presence in the region, and authorized seizures of vessels linked to alleged trafficking. In late December, China criticized the U.S. interception of a China-bound oil tanker off Venezuela's coast, calling it a violation of international law and opposing what it described as unilateral sanctions. China remains Venezuela's largest buyer of crude oil, accounting for around 4% of its total oil imports.
The United States went to Venezuela in August. They sat there threatening publicly Venezuela, but behind closed door, they were negotiating with the traders of Venezuela. The major reason why they did not want Maduro to remain, because even Maduro was ready to work with them, say, look, we have the biggest oil reserve on the planet. We can make a deal with you. But the reason why the United States absolutely did not want Maduro is because it was an embarrassment. If Maduro had remained there, right, the US was going to leave that area humiliated. Because even though they would have had a deal with Maduro, but they've already came out, with strength, right, trying to show people, look, we are going to take this by force. So you're already telling the people you're going to take something by force. And then at the end of the day, Maduro is still there, and you are the one who left. Nobody would have known the secret deal you had with Maduro. So the US always wants something publicly, right? Something that they can show so that they can try to send a message across that, look, we are still the superpower. And that is the pathetic story of the US today, is that all they can rely on now is media, right? Propaganda. When in fact, even going to war with Venezuela, they knew that even if they were to win Venezuela, the US was going to be the biggest loser in that war. As we continue to listen and pay attention to what is going on, the truth is starting to come out. So what we can see from the deal between the traders of Venezuela and the US is that most of the administration of Maduro will still be in place, working with the United States. It seemed like the US would dump the opposition. The power is with the army. The US cannot send its troops to Venezuela, right? Because there are groups that may stand up against the US. That is why you don't see any boots on the ground in Venezuela. They fear some type of attack, right? The work that needs to be done now is to try to see if there are any groups who are preparing to stand up against the US. And that is where they need the Maduro's army, the traitors. They want to make sure that the army is going to calm the population down. And once the army will calm the population down, those oil companies will come in, work with the government in place, because that is the only way you can have Venezuela at peace and then steal its oil at the same time. If Venezuela is not at peace, the US will not benefit from its oil. And that is why there is a strong possibility that they will not work with the opposition. The opposition will still remain there looking at Donald Trump like, look, what happened, right? Don't be surprised if you see that. There is a major deal between the US and the generals of the army of Venezuela. And that deal will probably justify the reason why most of Maduro's cabinet will still be running the country. So even though, looking at what happened, in the short term, it gives the US some type of leverage to say, oh, maybe they're strong and they can still do this. And in the long term, it will weaken the US because everybody is disgusted by what happened, right? Even the so-called EU, but they can't say anything because this is their masters, right? Everybody's condemning the US, right? They're talking about taking Maduro to court for drugs and all of that. How? With no evidence, nothing is going to happen, right? So all of that weakened the US tremendously. But the reason behind this action is more dire for the US than anything. For them to take such an unprecedented action of demolishing all the laws that they themselves put in place to do this, it shows you clearly that the US is in major decline. Like I said in my previous videos, The US did not invade, and that's the good news about this entire thing. We did not see a war in Venezuela. That is what we're satisfied with. The good news about that is that the Venezuelan army was able to show the US that invading Venezuela will be the worst decision that the US would have made. And therefore, the weakness of the US is seen with the fact that for 4 months, they sat there negotiating. The only thing that invaded Venezuela was the US dollar that went to bribe the traitors of the Maduro's regime.